She took the same path to work every single morning, a simple half-hour walk. But on one ordinary Friday, 19-year-old Leah Croucher stepped out her front door and vanished completely. For over 1,000 days, her family and police searched for answers, never knowing the horrifying truth was hidden just feet from where she was last seen, in a house they had already been to. This is a story of a devastating failure that allowed a predator to hide in plain sight. To ensure that Leah's story is heard, and these failures are never forgotten, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to shed light on these vital cases. The day began with an illusion of profound normalcy, the kind that settles over a city like a quiet blanket just before the dawn. In Milton Keynes, the air on that February morning was likely filled with the mundane symphony of a world stirring to life, the distant rumble of early traffic, the first birdsong, the quiet hum of 1,000 households beginning their daily rituals. For 19-year-old Leah Croucher, it was a morning indistinguishable from all the others that had come before it in her young life. It was simply the start of another workday. She stepped out of her home to begin the familiar half-hour walk to her job, a journey so ingrained in her routine that her feet surely knew the way without conscious thought. This was her path, a simple, predictable line drawn between the sanctuary of home and the structured world of work. How many times had she walked it, her Converse sneakers meeting the same stretches of pavement, her eyes passing the same houses, the same trees? It was a journey completed countless times before. A fragile sense of safety built not on locks or alarms, but on the foundation of its sheer, unceasing repetition. But on this day, the predictable rhythm was shattered. The familiar path did not lead to its usual destination. At her workplace, her chair remained empty, her computer screen dark, her absence a silent, growing question mark in the bustling office. At first, it was nothing. A missed bus, perhaps, or a simple oversleep. But as the morning wore on, casual inquiries slowly morphed into a more pronounced concern. Back at the family home, the hours began to stretch and thin, each tick of the clock amplifying an unsettling quiet. The end of the workday came and went. The sun began its descent, yet the front door remained stubbornly shut. Leah did not return. The first threads of worry, initially small and easily brushed aside, began to weave themselves into something tighter, something much closer to real, palpable fear. Her family reached for their phones, a modern reflex for reassurance, fully expecting to hear her voice, a simple explanation, anything to calm the rising anxiety. Each call they made, however, was met with an unyielding digital void. Her phone, the device that was supposed to be a lifeline of constant connection, offered only an unnerving silence. It was an electronic ghost where a daughter's voice should have been. With every unanswered call, the worry intensified, twisting into a cold, heavy knot of dread in the pit of their stomachs. The sun finally set on Milton Keynes, casting long, menacing shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness that was now creeping into their hearts. As the night deepened, the terrifying truth settled upon them like a physical weight. This was no simple delay. This was no youthful miscommunication. Leah had vanished. That moment of horrific realization was the beginning of a fall into an abyss. It would trigger one of the most extensive and all-consuming missing person investigations in recent British history, a sprawling search that would grip the nation's attention. The path forward for investigators would become a cruel labyrinth of false leads, haunted by discoveries that only deepened the mystery, and ultimately marred by devastating questions about justice and accountability. But for Leah's loved ones, it was something far more intimate and agonizing. It was the beginning of an unbearable nightmare, a private torment of unanswerable questions that would stretch on for years, refusing to release its hold. It was a nightmare that would ultimately conclude in the most heartbreaking and unimaginable way possible. To understand the depth of the void Leah Croucher left behind, one must first understand the vibrant life that was taken. She was not a statistic or a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend, a young woman whose personality was a gentle blend of quiet strength and profound warmth. Born on August 14, 1999, Leah lived in Milton Keynes with her parents, John and Claire, who described their daughter as a bright, confident, and deeply loving soul. In a world that often prizes loudness and constant social motion, Leah found her comfort in the calm. She was a young woman who much preferred the solace of a good book or the simple joy of a night spent in watching a movie with her family, rather than the allure of going out. While she was active on social media, particularly Snapchat, using it as a modern way to keep in touch with her circle of friends, her heart was truly at home. She was especially close to her older half-siblings, Jade, and in particular, her brother Hayden. Theirs was a special bond, one fortified not just by blood but by a shared discipline that ran deep within the family's core, the martial art of Taekwondo. Their father, John, was a Taekwondo instructor, and he passed his passion and knowledge down to his children, making the sport a powerful thread that connected them all. Together, Leah and Hayden practiced their shared journey in the sport, forging a unique and powerful connection between them. Leah didn't just participate, she excelled. Her dedication and natural talent saw her rise through the ranks to compete at an international level, a testament to her focus and inner strength. This discipline revealed a compelling contrast within her. The quiet homebody who loved movies was also a fierce and skilled competitor on a global stage. It was this quiet strength, this unwavering dedication, that made her sudden and silent disappearance all the more baffling to those who knew and loved her best. In the vast, intricate tapestry of a life, the most significant threads are often woven in silence, unnoticed until the entire picture unravels. The day before she vanished, Thursday, the 14th of February, 2019, appeared to be just another ordinary day. Leah finished her shift at the finance company and began her usual walk home, a familiar ritual marking the transition from work back to the comfort of her family. Yet, beneath this surface of routine, a series of small, almost imperceptible anomalies began to emerge. The first occurred at 5:45 in the evening. For reasons that remained shrouded in mystery, the location settings on her mobile phone were suddenly switched off. To an outsider, it was a minor digital action, but to her family, it was a significant break in character, a deliberate act of privacy from a young woman who had never before felt the need to hide her whereabouts. It was the first subtle tear in the fabric of her predictability. When she arrived home around 6 o'clock, she changed her clothes, and then another unusual event unfolded. She informed her mother that she was heading out to visit with friends. For the girl who cherished quiet nights in, who consistently chose the comfort of her home over social outings, this was a surprising and uncharacteristic announcement. It raised a quiet question. Was this visit a spontaneous decision, or was it something more, a meeting she felt she couldn't fully disclose? She returned just over an hour later, at 7:15, and by all accounts, her demeanor was completely normal. She appeared calm, her evening seemingly uneventful, offering no outward signs of distress or agitation. This placid exterior only deepens the enigma of her final hours. What happened during that brief time away from home? Who did she meet? The calm she projected may have been genuine, or it could have been a mask, carefully worn to conceal a turmoil brewing beneath. The rest of the evening passed without incident, a portrait of domestic tranquility. At 10 o'clock, Leah said goodnight to her parents, a simple, loving gesture she had performed thousands of times before. They had no way of knowing that this mundane nightly ritual was, in fact, a final, heartbreaking farewell. It would be the last time they would ever see their daughter alive. The morning of Friday, the 15th of February, 2019, dawned with the same quiet promise as any other day. Inside the Croucher home on Quantock Crescent, Leah woke and prepared for work. A subtle but significant detail of that morning was the silence of the house. Her parents had already gone for the day, leaving Leah to her own routine in the empty home. At approximately 8 o'clock, she stepped out the front door for the last time, beginning the familiar 2-mile journey to her office. She was dressed for the cool February air in layers of dark clothing that would soon become the uniform of a ghost, etched into the public's memory. A black coat, black skinny jeans, a pair of black Converse high-top sneakers, and a distinctive gray Taekwondo hoodie. Over her shoulder, she carried a black rucksack containing her personal belongings, and in her hand or pocket, she held her Samsung phone, her last fragile link to the world she was about to leave behind. As she walked, she moved from the privacy of her quiet street into the view of the city's unblinking electronic eyes. She was captured on a security camera at 8:07 near Lee Hill, a fleeting digital image of a young woman simply on her way to work. A second camera recorded her moments later at 8:15 on Buzzacott Lane in Furston, her stride appearing steady and purposeful. She seemed to be heading towards Locksbear Drive at Chaffron Way, just another anonymous figure on a network of familiar paths. No one watching those grainy images in real time could have known their profound and chilling significance. They were the last verifiable, confirmed sightings of Leah Croucher alive. In these final recorded moments, she was a person of substance, of movement, of life. Seconds later, she would step beyond the camera's frame and walk into an impenetrable mystery, her image dissolving from the tangible world into a haunting memory. A mother's intuition often carries a weight of unspoken wisdom, a gentle warning that hums just beneath the surface of daily life. Leah's mother had frequently offered such advice, urging her daughter to vary her route to work for the simple sake of safety, to break the predictable pattern that could make one vulnerable. But Leah was a creature of habit, finding comfort and efficiency in the familiar. She almost always followed the same well-trodden path, a route that had become second nature to her. This was the expectation, the solid ground upon which the first hours of the investigation were built. Her usual journey would take her from Buzzacott Lane and then into Faraday Drive, using the connecting redways to travel north toward her office. Police investigators, working with the certainty of her routine, confirmed that this was the precise path she had taken on both the 13th and 14th of February, the 2 days immediately preceding her disappearance. With this established pattern, investigators began to meticulously review the city's vast network of surveillance cameras, fully expecting to trace her steps, to follow the digital breadcrumbs she should have left behind. They anticipated seeing her emerge onto Faraday Drive, just as she had done countless times before. Instead, they found an inexplicable and terrifying void. The extensive review of the video footage yielded a chilling fact. Leah never arrived on Faraday Drive on the morning she went missing. The cameras that had always captured her, the unblinking witnesses that had recorded her daily passage, showed nothing. She had vanished into a blind spot, a small, unmonitored gap between 2 points on her journey. Somewhere in that short distance, in those few unrecorded minutes after she was last seen on Buzzacott Lane, her journey had taken a sharp, invisible, and devastating turn. Then came the final, chilling piece of the puzzle from her last known possession. At 34 minutes past 8 in the morning, her mobile phone was switched off. This was not a battery dying or a signal lost in a tunnel. It was a deliberate, digital severing of her last connection to the world. In the space of just a few minutes, she had disappeared from physical sight and then from the digital network that tethered her to her family and friends. The girl of unwavering routine had inexplicably broken her pattern. The question was no longer simply where she was, but why she had deviated from the path she always took. Was it a choice she made freely, or was it a choice that had been violently made for her? The hours of a workday possess a familiar, steady rhythm, a predictable flow that culminates in the quiet comfort of returning home. As the afternoon waned, the Croucher household was filled with that soft, anticipatory silence, waiting for the familiar sound of a key in the lock, for Leah's footsteps on the stairs, for the simple, reassuring presence that signaled the day's end. But the designated hour came and went, and the silence in the house only deepened, stretching thin and becoming taut with an unvoiced anxiety. At first, the mind offers rationalizations. Plausible reasons for a minor delay, a chat with a coworker, a missed bus, a quick stop at a shop. These are the small, hopeful lies one tells oneself to keep a budding fear at bay. But then, the phone rang, and with that single, jarring sound, every fragile hope was instantly and brutally shattered. The call came at 5 o'clock in the afternoon from Leah's workplace. The voice on the other end was professional, inquiring, but the words they spoke plunged her parents into a cold, disorienting shock. Leah had never arrived for her shift that morning. The illusion of her safety, the entire day spent with the assumption that she was secure within the walls of her office, was obliterated in a single sentence. The fear was no longer a budding anxiety, it was a full-blown, suffocating panic. Their hands, now trembling, began the frantic ritual of the desperate, dialing her number again and again. Each call was a prayer, a desperate plea for her voice to answer, but each was met with the same chilling electronic void. The unanswered rings echoed in the silent house, each one a confirmation of her absence, a testament to their growing helplessness. In a desperate search for answers, for any clue that could explain the impossible, her bedroom was sought out. It was a sanctuary, a space that was entirely hers, yet now it felt alien, like a scene frozen in time. Everything was in its place, a portrait of perfect normalcy that was now utterly terrifying. Her bed was neatly made, the belongings on her desk were in order, her clothes put away. The room held the ghost of her presence from that very morning, but it offered no explanation for her absence now. There was no note, no sign of a hurried departure, nothing to suggest she had planned to go anywhere but her normal everyday job. The sheer orderliness of the room was a silent, screaming testament that something was terribly wrong. Leah was simply gone. That evening, faced with an unbearable reality, the family split into two roles of desperation. Her mother, Claire, made the phone call that every parent prays they will never have to make, officially reporting her daughter missing to the police. At the same time, her father, John, unable to bear the static helplessness of waiting, went out into the encroaching darkness to begin searching for her himself. The long night had just begun, and with it, their long, agonizing vigil into the unknown. The family's initial frantic search soon gave way to the vast, methodical machinery of an official police investigation. The disappearance of Leah Croucher was no longer a private agony, it became a public emergency, triggering one of the most extensive and resource-intensive missing person searches in the region's recent history. The scale of the operation was immense, a testament to the gravity of the situation. Hundreds of officers and staff were committed to the singular, all-consuming task of finding Leah. They began to move through the city like a meticulous tide. Their primary effort focused on a staggering number of house-to-house inquiries. They knocked on over 4,000 doors, their questions painting a portrait of a community mobilized by a shared sense of urgency, yet holding no immediate answers. Each closed door, each polite headshake, only deepened the growing void at the center of the investigation. The search radiated outwards from the last known points of her journey, moving beyond the paved streets and into the natural landscape that bordered her route. Specialist search teams, equipped for the difficult terrain, were deployed in force. Highly trained search dogs, with their unique ability to sense what human eyes cannot, were led through dense woodland and across vast open fields. From the sky, helicopters scanned the landscape, their crews searching for any sign of disturbance, any splash of color that did not belong. The search also plunged beneath the surface of the region's placid lakes. Dive units, moving through the cold, murky water, scoured the depths for any clue that might have been submerged. At the same time, a separate team of investigators began the Herculean task of reviewing over 1,200 hours of closed-circuit television footage, a painstaking, frame-by-frame search for a ghost on a digital screen. Simultaneously, the appeal for information was broadcast far and wide, transforming Leah's face into one that was recognized across the nation. Local news channels carried her story, their reports filled with heartfelt pleas from her devastated family. Her image was displayed on large screens at the Milton Keynes Dons football stadium, a silent appeal made to a crowd of thousands in the hope that a single person might hold the key. A powerful social media campaign was launched, allowing her story to spread organically and exponentially, reaching far beyond the physical boundaries of the search. Donations from a concerned public poured in to fund a reward for any information that could lead to her discovery. The community and the police were united in a massive, singular effort. Yet, despite the thousands of hours, the hundreds of officers, the vast technical resources, and the impassioned public appeals, the result was the same. Every path led to a dead end. Every effort was met with a profound and unnerving silence. There was still no trace of Leah. In the vast and empty silence of a search that yielded nothing, the first public appeals began to stir a fragile flicker of hope. As Leah's story and her image spread, witnesses started to come forward, their memories offering tantalizing possibilities that briefly pierced the darkness. The first significant lead emerged from the area near Furston Lake. Several people reported seeing a young woman who matched Leah's description, walking near the water's edge on the very morning she had vanished, sometime between 9:30 and 11:15. This was the first tangible thread in a case that had, until that point, been a complete and baffling void. The information galvanized the search effort, focusing the immense resources of the police force onto a single, promising location. Specialist teams, search dogs, helicopters, and dive units all converged on the lake, a wave of renewed energy fueled by the hope that they were finally close. They scoured the banks, combed the nearby woods, and searched the cold, silent water. But after an exhaustive and meticulous operation, the result was a crushing disappointment. Nothing was found. Months crawled by, each one a painful anniversary of her absence. Then, her case was featured on the national BBC program Crime Watch, broadcasting her story to a massive new audience and breathing new life into the investigation. The appeal worked. A new witness came forward with a chillingly specific memory from back in February. They recalled seeing a gray hoodie floating in the water of the Blue Lagoon Lake. The detail was potent and immediately electrifying to investigators. Leah had been wearing a gray taekwondo hoodie when she disappeared. This felt different from a fleeting sighting of a person. It was a potential piece of physical evidence, a concrete link to Leah herself. This single report was enough to spark another massive, intensive search operation. For 10 long days, teams were deployed to the Blue Lagoon, their efforts relentless as they dredged and searched, desperate to validate the lead. But once again, the exhaustive search yielded nothing. The lake kept its secrets, and the hoodie, whether a misremembered detail or a clue long since lost to the water, was never found. For Leah's family, each of these potential breakthroughs was an agonizing false dawn, a cruel mirage of hope that shimmered briefly before dissolving back into the harsh reality of their unending nightmare. As the official investigation ground on, chasing down anonymous tips and reviewing endless hours of footage, a separate and far more personal inquiry was being waged. It was a search fueled not by procedural duty, but by the raw, unyielding agony of a brother's love. While the police looked for a ghost in the city's machinery, Leah's older brother, Hayden Croucher, was consumed by a singular, burning conviction. He could not bear the passive agony of waiting for a breakthrough that never came. His grief was an active force, a terrible energy that needed a target, and in his mind, it had found one. His anguish became laser-focused on a man who existed on the periphery of Leah's life, a work colleague, 9 years her senior and reportedly engaged to be married to someone else at the time. In Hayden's mind, a dark and terrible narrative had taken root, a belief born from a desperate need to make sense of the senseless. He became convinced that this man had groomed his vulnerable younger sister, that he held the key to her disappearance. This belief was not a quiet suspicion. It was a consuming obsession that demanded action. His torment was not a quiet one. It spilled over into the real world in a direct and desperate confrontation. Racked with pain and a fierce, protective rage, Hayden was accused of threatening the man, his anguish manifesting as an open accusation. The police, obligated to follow every potential lead, investigated Hayden's claims with the thoroughness they deserved. They looked into the man's life, his connection to Leah, searching for any evidence of an inappropriate relationship or any link to her vanishing. But the cold, hard world of evidence did not align with the fiery conviction of a grieving brother. After a comprehensive investigation, they found nothing to substantiate Hayden's fears. There was no proof of a relationship, no evidence of grooming, nothing to tie the man to Leah's disappearance in any way. He was officially and completely ruled out as a suspect by the authorities. For the investigation, it was a dead end. But for Hayden, this official absolution was not closure. It was another wall built between him and the truth he so desperately believed in. The legal system, responding to the threats he had made, served him with a restraining order, a legal document that served only to wall him off further, isolating him inside his own torment. The official channels had failed him, and now the one path he had forged for himself had been legally barred. The heavy burden of his grief, now compounded by frustration and helplessness, did not lessen. It grew heavier still. The seasons had turned. The cold of that February morning giving way to the passage of spring and summer, and finally the chill of a late autumn. But for the Croucher family, the emotional landscape remained frozen, trapped in the unending winter of the day Leah disappeared. The frantic energy of the initial search had long since faded, replaced by the dull, grinding ache of a mystery that offered no answers and no peace. Hope, once a roaring fire fueled by community action and police efforts, had dwindled to a fragile, flickering ember, struggling to survive in the suffocating darkness of uncertainty. For Hayden Croucher, this unending silence was a unique and relentless form of torture. He was a young man of action, a martial artist trained in discipline and purpose, yet he found himself trapped in a state of absolute powerlessness. His one desperate attempt to forge a path toward an answer, his fierce conviction about Leah's colleague, had been dismissed and legally blocked, leaving him in a profound state of isolation. He was not only grieving the loss of his beloved sister but also grappling with the crushing weight of his inability to protect her, to find her, or to bring what he believed was justice. He was a warrior without a fight, a brother without a sister to save. This unresolved anguish, a wound that could not heal because its cause remained unknown, festered within him. In November of 2019, 9 long and agonizing months after his sister walked into the unknown, the weight became insurmountable. The despair became an abyss from which he could not escape. The Croucher family, already fractured by the agonizing uncertainty of one loss, was struck by a second, unthinkable tragedy. Overwhelmed by the despair that had become his constant companion, Hayden took his own life. He was just 24 years old. The news was a devastating blow that sent a shockwave of new grief through a family already at its breaking point. They were now a family mourning not only a missing child, but also one who was tragically, definitively gone forever. The search for Leah, the mission that had consumed their every waking moment, was now irrevocably overshadowed by this new, brutal finality. The community continued to hold vigils and fundraisers, their efforts a testament to their unwavering support. But now these gatherings were tinged with a deeper, more complex sorrow. They were no longer just searching for Leah, they were now mourning for Hayden, the brother who could not bear to live in a world without her. Time, in the absence of answers, becomes a unique and cruel form of punishment. For the Croucher family, the days bled into weeks, the weeks into months, and then, impossibly, into years. The investigation, once a flurry of urgent activity, had slowed to a near standstill, the case file growing thicker with reports that led nowhere, its pages a testament to a trail that had gone utterly and devastatingly cold. The public's attention, once so intensely focused on Leah's face, inevitably began to drift, a natural consequence of a world that keeps turning. But for her family, time did not move forward. It simply accumulated, each passing day another layer of suffocating silence. In the year 2021, in a renewed effort to break through this wall of silence, the reward for information was raised to a substantial £20,000. It was a sum of money that could change a life, yet it failed to produce a single credible lead. The secrets of Leah's disappearance, it seemed, were not for sale at any price. On the 3rd anniversary of the day she vanished, a date of unimaginable pain for her family, the police made a public appeal in a desperate attempt to rekindle the investigation. They released a photograph, a grainy image taken by a passerby on that fateful February morning. It depicted a solitary figure, dressed entirely in black, near the edge of Furston Lake. For a moment, it felt like a significant breakthrough. It seemed to validate the earliest witness accounts, the ones that spoke of a distressed young woman seen in that very same area. It was a tangible piece of potential evidence, a ghostly echo from the past that might finally offer a new direction. But this flicker of hope was extinguished almost as quickly as it appeared. After further analysis and investigation, police had to make the disheartening announcement that the figure in the photograph was not Leah. It was just another stranger, another dead end, another cruel coincidence in a case full of them. Later that same year, another voice emerged from the past. A new witness came forward, her memory belatedly piecing together a strange and unsettling scene she had witnessed on the morning of February the 15th. She recalled seeing a black car driven by a man she estimated to be in his 30s or 40s. But it was the passenger that had stuck in her mind. This person had their feet propped up on the dashboard, and the witness had the distinct impression that the shoes were far too small to belong to an adult man. They were almost certainly female. The most disturbing detail, however, was the driver's sudden, violent movement. She remembered seeing him twist aggressively in his seat, as if he were forcefully trying to push someone or something down and out of sight. It was a compelling and deeply sinister image, but it was incomplete. The witness had not seen the car's license plate. And so, this tantalizing fragment of a story, like every witness sighting and every potential lead before it, dissolved into nothing. It was just another haunting question mark added to an agonizingly long list, and the case, now years old, was colder than it had ever been before. After 3 years, 8 months, and 3 excruciatingly long days, the silence finally broke. The case had long since been relegated to the cold, quiet archives of the unsolved, a wound in the community that had scarred over but never truly healed. Hope had become a ghost, a whispered word from a distant past. And then, on a Monday evening, at approximately 6:30, a single phone call to the police shattered the long, stagnant peace. It was a piece of information from a member of the public, a lead that directed investigators not to a remote lake or a desolate field, but to an ordinary, unassuming property on Locksbear Drive in Furston. It was a street name that was chillingly familiar, a location situated directly on the route Leah walked every day, a place that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Police officers attended the address, their approach likely tempered by the hard-earned caution that comes from years of chasing fruitless leads. They entered the property, and in the still, dusty air of the unoccupied house, the unraveling began. It started with the discovery of a number of items that did not belong to the home. First, they found a rucksack. Then, other personal possessions were located, items that immediately transformed the atmosphere from one of routine inquiry to one of grim, heart-stopping certainty. These were personal effects belonging to Leah Croucher, the young woman who was reported missing on the 15th of February, 2019. The ghost they had been chasing for years suddenly had a tangible, physical presence in this quiet house. Nearby, close to where her rucksack was found, the search came to its most dreadful and definitive end. Investigators discovered human remains. The agonizing ambiguity that her family had been forced to endure for more than 1,000 days was over. The search for Leah was finished. As a direct result of this horrific discovery, the Thames Valley Police made a solemn and long-feared announcement. The investigation was officially changed. The desperate, hopeful search for a missing person was now, irrevocably, a murder investigation. The question was no longer where Leah was, but who had taken her life in this silent, waiting house. With the horrific discovery inside the house on Locksbear Drive, the entire axis of the investigation shifted with brutal velocity. The agonizing, years-long question of where Leah was had finally been answered in the most tragic way imaginable. Now, the full, crushing weight of the police force turned to the singular, damning question of who. The investigation, which had for so long been a sprawling search across a wide, empty landscape, now narrowed to a single, sharp point, the four walls of that silent house. And from within the shadows of that property, a name was finally pulled. Investigators were able to nominate a prime suspect, a name that would soon become synonymous with the case, Neil Maxwell. The connection was chillingly direct and damning. Police learned that the house itself was owned by someone who lived overseas and rarely, if ever, visited the United Kingdom. During the specific and critical time when Leah was reported missing, it was established that Neil Maxwell was the only person to have keys to that property. He was the sole gatekeeper to the place where Leah's life had ended. He was not just a person of interest, he was the only person with the verified access and opportunity. But just as investigators felt the first real sense of certainty in years, they collided with a devastating and insurmountable wall. The suspect they had spent years unknowingly searching for was beyond their reach. He was a ghost. Neil Maxwell had been found dead on the 20th of April, 2019, having taken his own life. The timeline was a cruel and twisted irony. Maxwell had killed himself just a few short weeks after Leah had vanished, long before the first vigils were held, long before her brother's torment had reached its tragic conclusion, and long before the first anniversary of her disappearance had passed. By the time detectives finally linked his name to her fate, it was already far, far too late. The man they needed to question was gone, and with him, he had taken every secret of that terrible day. Investigators delved into his history, and the portrait that emerged was one of a predator who had been hiding in plain sight. Maxwell was a convicted sex offender, a man already known to the police as violent and dangerous. At the very moment Leah disappeared, he was already a wanted man, sought in connection with another assault. The only man who knew what really happened to Leah Croucher, the only one who could answer the thousands of questions that haunted her family, had escaped into silence. Justice, in any conventional sense, was now impossible. The discovery in the attic of the house on Locksbear Drive did not just close a missing person case. It opened a Pandora's box of horrifying questions about the investigation itself. The truth, it turned out, had not been buried in a remote field or hidden in the depths of a lake. It had been sitting quietly in a house on Leah's route, a house that was part of the primary search area from the very beginning. With the suspect now identified as a known violent offender who had been wanted at the time of her disappearance, a chilling and unavoidable question began to take shape. How was this missed? The answer, when it emerged, was a portrait of devastating systemic failure. Police confirmed the almost unbelievable fact that they had visited the house at number 2 Lockspear Drive on at least 2 separate occasions during their massive door-to-door inquiries in the early days of the search. They had stood on the very doorstep of the place where Leah was being held. But when their knocks went unanswered, they simply dropped a leaflet through the letterbox requesting a call back if the occupants had any information, and then they walked away. They never went back. They never followed up. A house that should have been a critical point of interest, situated directly on her last known path, was dismissed after receiving no response. The failure was compounded by a series of ignored warnings about Neil Maxwell himself. He was not an unknown entity, he was a predator who was already on the police's radar. It was later revealed that employers and even an ex-girlfriend had tried to sound the alarm about him. One ex-girlfriend had given an explicit and prophetic warning, telling police in no uncertain terms, "If you don't stop him, he will kill." Those words, a desperate plea to prevent a tragedy, were ignored. In June of 2024, a coroner's inquest delivered a formal and damning verdict on these catastrophic oversights. The coroner condemned the failures, stating that a violent predator who was supposedly being monitored had been left free to kill. The oversight had collapsed, and the decision not to return to that house, not to properly investigate a silent, unoccupied property in the heart of the search area, was a devastating mistake that changed everything. For Leah's parents, no official report, no inquest, and no apology could ever ease the profound and unending pain of their loss. For 3.5 years, they had begged for answers, only to find the truth hidden just a short walk from their own home. At the house where their daughter was finally found, the place that had held her in silence for so long, they left a heartbreaking note, a final message to their child. "Our darling Leah," it read, "our darkest fears have come true. We only need to be apart a little longer now. We have missed you for so long already. The future looks so bleak now that we know we will never see your smile or hear your laugh again. We will cherish your memories forever. We love you, Mom and Dad." Her funeral was held at the Crown Hill Crematorium, and as the procession made its way through the streets, crowds of friends, neighbors, and strangers stood in the rain to pay their last respects. Her coffin was draped in the scarlet and gold flags of Gryffindor, a touching tribute to her deep love of the Harry Potter series. In the gray sky, balloons were released, carrying messages like "Fly high and reach for the skies," a final, beautiful farewell to a life taken far too soon. Leah Croucher's case is not just a tragedy, it is a profound failure. It is the story of a predator left free to hunt, a house searched but never truly investigated, and a family utterly destroyed by mistakes that should never have been made. It leaves behind a single, brutal, and unanswerable question that will forever haunt the memories of all involved. Could the police have done more? If those warnings had been heeded, if that door had been opened just one day sooner, would Leah still be alive today? We will never know the answer. But what we do know is that a bright, loving young person with her entire life ahead of her was taken away far too soon, and she will be missed every single day by those that loved her. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.